I think DeAndre Ayton, if he can continue to develop his game, he's got that Embiid type of quality where he can go to the block, he can step out and hit a jumper, and he can be like Capella was for the Rockets and really control the rim for them. Mo Bamba going to the Magic, that's scary because the Magic have a slew of big guys and they don't know what to do with them. They just drafted Jonathan Isaacs last year. He didn't hardly play. He fought injuries all year. Aaron Gordon is a restricted free agent. They have Vucevic. They signed Bismack Biyombo after one playoff series where he went crazy. They gave him a ton of money. I don't know how many big guys they think. I don't know what league they're watching that they need like 8 bigs, but that should be why the Magic are going to be in the draft, in the lottery specifically, for a long time, because they just keep taking these guys that don't really fit what they're trying to do. I don't even know if they have any guards on the roster left outside DJ Augustine. So that's a concern for me with him. And same with Jaren Jackson Jr. going to Memphis. It seems like those guys go there and just kind of go to waste. And I feel like Bamba could fall into that same category where in 2 or 3 years, you're like, Mo Bamba, that name sounds familiar. He's just going to be a guy that's part of a trade that, just a throw-in name. That concerns me with them. But I do like what the Celtics did at the end of the first round, getting a guy like Rob Williams. Now, he's a guy that's got issues. He slept through their opening conference call, which is always great on one of your first days. And luckily, the Celtics tried to say it was a time zone issue and his iPhone didn't go off and all this different stuff. He didn't have cell service. But that's a guy that had top 15 mock potential, and the Celtics sit back at 27, and he falls to them. And they're probably going to lose Aaron Baines. We know what they're trying to do with signing Kyrie and all these other players that they have to sort of figure out what they're going to do with Marcus Smart. And you get a guy like him that can come in, protect the rim for you. I like that move a lot that they made.
Yeah, it seems like Danny Ainge and the Celtics just have had a nice couple of years where you can see the momentum building. We obviously know in 2008 that Boston was very good. It's been a rough decade, but they're really on their way back. There's a lot of people that think Boston is still one of the leaders in the Kawhi Leonard sweepstakes, so that team could be an absolute powerhouse in the East come next year. We just got to see what the next month or so holds. Before we wrap up segment 1, at the 21st pick, the Utah Jazz select Grayson Allen from Duke, and all I got to know is, who is he going to trip first in the NBA?
Well, didn't you hope as he was walking up the stairs he would trip and fall on the stage? That's what I was kind of hoping, and he'd fall over like those little kids. One of them would trip him or something. He'd fall up the steps. I know who he shouldn't probably trip. He should probably not trip Draymond Green. That would probably not be best for him because I could see them throwing down. And I wouldn't trip Lance Stevenson. Those are two guys I think I would stay away from. Maybe pick a nice bench player or somebody like that and trip them. But I don't think that's going to fly in the league the way he did. I remember Dellavedova, and he kind of got that reputation about him when he slid into Korver's ankle and then he hurt someone else on the Hawks. And those guys were ready to throw down. So in college, yeah, those guys, a lot of guys you're tripping, they're not making money. And this, you trip and hurt a guy that's making multiple millions of dollars and you take him out, that's not going to fly well. So he either might want to get some goggles to protect him from a black eye or maybe just cut those shenanigans out.
Oh, and poor Lance Stevenson, you just brought up his name. The Indiana Pacers, who we lauded for having Lance stick around for another playoff series against the Cavs, they lost that series. And once again, the Pacers are not going to pick up Lance's option, and so he's not going to be an Indiana Pacer next year. Who knows where he'll end up, but it seems like this on-again, off-again relationship with the Pacers is over for Lance Stevenson.
Well, that'll do it for segment 1. When we come back, it's Talkworthy. We'll talk about the NBA upcoming free agency, where we think some of the stars will land. It's been pretty quiet out there. We'll try to figure out what is happening. The Spurs supposedly want nothing to do with the Lakers' trade offers for Kawhi. We'll revisit that topic we had last week. Eric and I'll discuss the World Cup, and then we'll talk NASCAR. We're back, and it's Talkworthy time. Let's talk a little NBA free agency. Obviously, we all know who's the biggest domino out there. Kevin Durant, right? What? Just kidding, Eric. But there is a site that had Kevin Durant up, which now Eric has thrown my iPad across the room, so I'll do this from the blind here. But obviously, LeBron James, where is LeBron James going to go? We spent some time last week talking about LeBron. I felt pretty strongly that there was no way he could go back to Cleveland, but this week leading up, Eric, it feels like more and more I read, there's a better and better chance that he could actually stay in Cleveland, that the whole lifestyle aspect, that his family being from that Cleveland area, his wife specifically, his boys playing on summer teams and kind of growing up in the Akron area, that maybe that's enough to swing him to stay in Cleveland over winning titles. So what does your gut tell you right now? Is Cleveland back into this thing? It feels like now it's become Cleveland or LA, that even Houston is starting to kind of fall back into the distance here.
I never thought Houston was a good play for LeBron James. If he goes to Houston, I just think it's terrible for the way that he plays basketball. I think it's terrible for his legacy. I think that really hurts him, and I think he's smart enough to know that. But we're also getting to the point where I said there's really two sides to take here. You either take the side, if you're LeBron, to say, you know what, I'm never going to be the greatest of all time, so screw the writers, screw anyone who wants to be against me. I'm going to LA, I'm going to build a super team, and I'm going to chase titles. If I win titles, great. People can think what they think. This is how I'm going to finish out my career. But the other side of LeBron wants to stay in Cleveland. I think there's still a lot we can say about the letter that he wrote 4 years ago to Sports Illustrated, the fact that he said, my heart is in Cleveland. I want to finish out my career in Cleveland. I think there's probably a part of him, and if we could invite him here into the studio, which would be awesome, by the way, but if we could do that and have a real conversation man-to-man with LeBron and say, did you mean that when you wrote that 4 years ago? I would expect him to say, yeah, I actually meant that. Just like we talked about last week, you go into something, whether it's your job, whether it's your marriage, whether it's the team that you play for, the NBA, with the best of intentions. And I think the best of his intentions 4 years ago was to come to Cleveland, bring a title to Cleveland, which he did, but part of him, or maybe a lot of him, really wants to stay there and finish his career. The problem with that is that he knows the challenge is greater with the team structure that is in Cleveland. Part of that, of course, being his fault with Tristan Thompson and J.R. Smith and some of those bad contracts. But if there's anything that Kobe, the new GM, can do, LeBron have good conversations. Kevin Love, I think the Cavs want Kevin Love to be there. If there's any way, now that they've got Sexton at point guard, I think that maybe moves the needle a little bit. If there's any way that they can work something, anything, and maybe that anything is to get desperate by moving Tristan or JR out of town and getting other role players or other pieces at a lower cost. Maybe LeBron is willing to take a lower cost. We talked about that and the challenges that he's going to face if he wants $35 million. But Justin, I'm with you. I think there are two plays here. I think, unfortunately, as a Sixers fan and a LeBron fan, I don't think he ends up in Philly. As I said, I don't think he ends up in Houston. He's not going to end up anywhere else. I mean, it just would be so random to have him in San Antonio or Phoenix. Or that's not how his legacy is going to end. It's L.A., probably Cleveland, Sixers maybe. But he's got a choice to make. Do I want to say, I don't care what anyone says about me, I'm going to LA, I'm going to win titles, I'm going to build a team, and that's how I'm going to finish? Or I'm going to play the hero, try to stay in Cleveland and try to bring more titles here, finish out here, so that no one can say I bolted again. He's got to make a choice and ultimately live with it. And I've talked about that before. He has a lot of choices he has to live with. This one's a big one.
It is a big one because we don't know the conversations that are taking place behind the scenes. You would have to think Chris Paul is putting a recruiting pitch on as a player for the Rockets. But then you also have to wonder what the conversations are of who's going to come to LA. If LeBron goes to LA, he has to bring talent with him. That's not a talented enough team for LeBron to go there and think he's going to get through Golden State, Houston. We just talked about even a team like Denver being on the rise. We don't know what the Spurs are going to do with Kawhi. That's a gauntlet you're going to have to get through in the West, and to go in undermanned, that's a tough task. So does a Paul George want to join him? Would Chris Paul leave the Rockets and not re-sign with him to join him in LA? Those are the things we don't know. But I know one thing, if he's going to go to LA, Eric, he's better get some talent around him, or it's a wasted year. It's a wasted year in year 16 of a player that the clock is ticking on in terms of his prime. So he can't waste a year. If you're going to waste a year, you might as well stay in Cleveland because the path at least is easier to get back to the finals. So at least LeBron can say this is 9 straight finals for me versus getting knocked out in the second round of the Western Conference. So those are the type of things that I see where I still feel like there could be a team that's off the radar that could come up through this thing. I don't think Philly's out of it yet, because I think LeBron has to look and go, okay, there's a lot of talk that Paul George, and he's been pretty consistent saying he likes Oklahoma City. On paper and watching it, it feels like there's no way that can happen, that playing with Westbrook, playing with Carmelo can't mix with his game that well, and it really didn't on the court. But there's a lot of talk that people feel like he could stay in Oklahoma City. So if that happens, it's like, okay, who are they going to bring in? We talked about in the teaser, the Lakers made a call to the Spurs, and it was reported they got shut down. And we talked about on the show last week that it was reported that Popovich does not want to deal with the Lakers. He does not want to make a deal to make them any better. He wants to make it as hard as possible. And you can't blame him. Why would you want to build another super team in the West if you feel you still have a window to win? So you start to look at who can LA bring in? Is it a DeMarcus Cousins? I don't see that as a play that they bring him in with LeBron and automatically they're a better team than the Rockets or Golden State.
No, the Lakers would need 2 or 3 pieces. Any writer that I've seen that holds their weight in the NBA circle of analysts basically says that you need 2 or 3 of the outside pieces in LA to make that work. Like you said, to run the gauntlet through the west side of the bracket. That means Kawhi, LeBron, Paul George, DeMarcus Cousins, as a Chris Paul opportunity, floating out there. Is there other guys that could make a move? It all comes down to salary, though. To me, if I'm LeBron, and this is the hardest part that I just can't get. If you're a multi-millionaire, almost billionaire, and you really want titles, stay in Cleveland. Take a veteran minimum, or that's probably not even allowed by the CBA, but take the minimum that you can take as LeBron James. Chris Paul can certainly take a minimum. Paul George can take a smaller fee. Try to say, okay, let's all regroup in Cleveland. It's still going to be an easier path for us coming up through the East, although that's very quickly becoming not true with Boston and Philly. But LeBron and crew, if there is a crew, so to speak, in Cleveland, you got to give them a puncher's chance. Then, you go to 9 straight, 10 straight, and see what happens. One of the things that kind of changed my mind about this was there was a lot of guys talking about LeBron's legacy, and we're not going to get into that, but one of the things they said is it's absolutely ridiculous to think that LeBron's 3-6 record in the finals is somehow worse than LeBron not making it to the finals, like losing in the first round to Toronto. And so as I thought about that more, it kind of made sense that, maybe LeBron drags another Cleveland team to the finals and gets beat by the Warriors yet again and goes 3-7. But we're at the point where I don't think that hurts his legacy any worse than him jumping ship, going to LA, and then getting knocked out in the second round by the Warriors, in a Laker uniform. I think that has just as much negative to his legacy as getting to the finals and losing. So I think for him, talk to these guys about salary. Talk to these guys about if you really want to compete, you got to do it at a number that makes sense for the team so that we can all be here, and then let's make that run. We're all in the twilight. LeBron's 16th year. Chris Paul's no spring chicken. You've got to make this your time to beat the Warriors.
The other side of this is, what does LeBron see his legacy at post-playing? Is he really serious about wanting to potentially buy the Cavaliers? So how does that affect him? Does him staying there, does that make it a franchise that is worth more money when LeBron and maybe a group of investors want to buy Cleveland? If he leaves there, does that devalue the franchise so much that it's $400 or $500 million off of their valuation, where it makes it an easier get for him down the road? I think some of those things have got to be in LeBron's mind as well, because there's been a lot of talk of, does LeBron kind of want to go that track? He's talked about wanting to be a billionaire athlete. He's obviously looks up to Michael Jordan. He's chasing him for the greatest of all time. He sees the path Jordan took with the Wizards and then into front office and into eventually ownership. So I start to think about even that way of what is LeBron's mind? What are they going through? He's talked about he doesn't want to go through all these elaborate pitches, that he feels like he and his team are very well versed on what the state of the league is and the state of these teams. So even that, you start to think about, well, he knows Cleveland very well, but he doesn't really know these other organizations that well. He doesn't know Luke Walton's style. He doesn't really know a lot about Brett Brown other than what Ben Simmons would tell him. So there's a lot of moving pieces here with LeBron, where I think everybody's trying to make it a Cleveland or LA, but I still think that there could be something else at play here with a different team. It's just so quiet. It's creepily quiet that there's no news leaking whatsoever really about anybody. And I think that's what makes it really difficult in looking at some of these guys, because even Chris Paul's unrestricted. There's nothing to say that he has to stay in Houston. If someone makes a more attractive offer to him, this is a guy, like you said, there's not a lot of years left for a guy like Chris Paul who struggles to make it through an NBA season and probably cost himself a trip to the finals with an injury this year. If a team that he can get on has multiple more talented players than he's on with the Rockets,